Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu. I'm Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with a very Amazonian Charles Coulombe.
Well, yes, of course. Of course I'm Amazonian. I am as Amazonian as any elderly white European man can be. That's right. And right now we got a whole bunch of my brethren, my fellow tribesmen in Rome, in a big powwow. They're passing the peace pipe. They're dancing the humba jumbas I was just doing. They're sacrificing cows to Pachamama. Oh, I'll tell you what, it's just great stuff. Why are you giving me that look?
Amazonians have a peace pipe?
Well, these do. I think that my fellow tribesmen are smoking the pot pipe or something. Bongs, I don't know. Anyway, they seem to be pretty into it at the moment.
That's for sure.
They're really rocking out, you know. See, when you get a lot of elderly men together, you know, who like kind of past it, sort of, you know, past their best by date, and they were people who had a vision, you know, who wanted to run away and do Last of the Mohicans when they were kids, and now they're all grown up and they can do it at other people's expense. It's great. It's really LARPing on a wide scale.
Ain't that the truth?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I understand exactly how they all feel. I loved Bomb of the Jungle Boy when I was a kid. I thought that was just the greatest thing. You know, raised by South American Indians and being out there with the jaguar in the jungle. Oh, gosh, yes. Yeah.
Sounds like Mowgli or something.
Well, that's India, but yeah, pretty much the same idea. And remember, none of these guys really know anything about what they're talking about anyway when it comes to Native Americans or the Amazon, or it could be India, it could be anywhere, it could be, I don't know, Nepal. I think if you told half of those folks that the Sherpas come from the Amazon, they wouldn't know any different. All we know is that the Sherpas in the Amazon need us to have married priests. Gay married priests.
Oh, man.
Listen, how are the Sherpas going to lead people down across the Amazon without that? Yeah, you can't answer that one, can you, smart guy? I didn't think so. Yeah.
It has been hard to watch, I tell you. And I can see from social media, everyone has this sort of sense of dread in the same way. I think we're all kind of collectively... Yeah, I mean, we're all kind of... If I could characterize how everyone's like looking at the Amazon thing in a single gesture, it would be like this. Oh, we got an image here. Oh, no. Okay, is it okay to look yet? Is it okay to look? Oh, no. It's like a scary movie, right? That's what you do during a scary movie. That means then it won't be as bad because you're like covering it up, you know, like watching The Exorcist. You know?
I had a priest friend of mine who was watching the film, and he was going on about how wonderful it was seeing the priestess with the snakes. And that, you know, listen, just seeing a bunch of old men live their fantasies with exotic native priestesses, weird rites of jungle love. You know, that was a thing. You guys don't understand. They had magazines back then like Blue Book and Argosy and all that. And these guys grew up on that stuff. You know, to adventure tales and all that. They're living their childhoods, being in their second childhoods, as you might say.
Yeah.
And best of all, they're able to do it at church expense on church property. That's real LARPing. I mean, imagine if the Society for Creative Anachronism could get a hold of a real cathedral. Think of the fun they'd have.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, they're reenactors for, you know, something real, the Middle Ages, but never mind. They're just living the dream. They're being true to their childhoods. I mean, if you had the chance, well, look, you've been to Disneyland. Yeah. You know the Enchanted Tiki Room.
Yeah, I love the Tiki Room with the birds.
Yeah, I do too. I love the Enchanted Tiki Room myself. The Jungle Cruise. You like the Jungle Cruise?
I like the Jungle Cruise. Yeah.
I love the Jungle Cruise. And they had another one like that at the late lamented Busch Gardens in the San Fernando Valley. They had a Jungle Cruise.
Okay.
And so these guys are just doing the whole tropical thing. But again, because they don't know that much, they kind of mix and match it. They do things that you would never see in the real world. But this is all imagination. It's putting like Disney did. It's taking his imagination and making it real. Now, it doesn't really correspond to anything on planet Earth. It's all interior directed. But fortunately, because they're in charge and they got the dough, they can do whatever they want. See? What's not to like?
Oh, I guess before we move on with the rest of the show, I feel compelled to ask you for any predictions coming out of this synod. Is there any chance that we could make it through this okay, or is...
I don't know how you define okay.
Not being closer to schism.
I don't even know what that means in this context. I mean, I really don't.
Okay, well, so what is the purpose of the synod? Are they going? They're going to produce a document, right?
They're going to produce a document, but what's really going to happen? I don't know. I don't know what's going to be in the document. My guess is that they're simply going to introduce all kinds of weird options. And a lot of people in certain churches, I don't want to mention the church in Germany, but certain churches will take advantage of them to do stupid things because they're like stupid. And the Holy Father will doubtless gaze on benevolently and wonder why his money is shrinking.
Well, they're just following the footsteps of the celebrated Martin Luther, what clergymen have called the mystic of grace. Right?
I remember that big chocolate statue they had of him to celebrate the anniversary.
Yeah.
And I couldn't tell whether the Pope was being funny or serious. I mean, when you have a statue of somebody in chocolate, are you really honoring them or are you mocking them? I don't know. What I do know is that if you're going to honor Martin Luther, the obvious way to honor him would be to treat the Pope of the time, whoever that Pope may be, the way he treated the Pope of his time. And that would seem like an open invitation to do so. Holy Father said he's not afraid of schism. Well, that could mean anything. Obviously, he doesn't believe in the necessity of the church for salvation, or that would be a fearful prospect because he would think about souls going to hell. But if basically you don't need him or his kind to save your soul, then none of it means anything anyway. And they might as well just enjoy the revenues and have a good time.
Well, I think on that line, I just think he didn't speak very well on that line. I imagine what he meant, my own personal interpretation of what he meant there was like in a game of chicken, where other people are expecting certain things from the Pope, otherwise they're going to schism. He's saying, I'm not going to back down.
Well, that's one way to look at it. I don't know. But how do you back down when your position is Jell-O?
What?
How do you back down when your position is Jell-O? What does he stand for? Nobody knows, really.
His position is Jell-O?
Yeah, his position is Jell-O.
What does that mean?
It means as much as anything else he says.
Okay.
Who knows? Who am I to judge? It's all this Neo-Pelagian demanding of definitions that's ruining the church today. This idea that words have to mean something. That is the problem. The greatest threat facing the church today is people attaching specific meanings to particular words.
Isn't it fun to say villainous things like that? It's very cathartic, isn't it?
Well, it is, and it's meaningless. What did I just say? I don't know. But, if you try to attach meaning to what I said, you're obviously a bad person.
No, if you worry about anything about the church and express open concern, then you're de facto hostile. That's the lesson from George Newmayer in that video. If you're worried about anything, you are de facto hostile.
I'm not concerned in the slightest. I have no concern for the Holy Father at all. He will take care of himself, I'm sure. I don't worry about his starving.
Us starving? Is that what you said?
I'm not worried about him starving.
I'm not worried about him starving either, so I guess that makes two of us.
Yeah, he's going to get his 3 squares no matter what he does, so he's fine.
All right, great.
How many of us can say that? Even high atop the Tumbler House Tower, you yourself would be ejected in a sort of family corporate coup if you didn't produce something or other. It's wonderful to be in a job where you just have to breathe, and you're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. We'd all love such a position. You can just do whatever you want, say what you like. Doesn't matter what anyone thinks, because, you're going to get your 3 squares a day. You're going to be taken care of. Everything's fine. So I'm not worried about the Holy Father in the slightest. He's okay.
Well, that's good, Charles.
Or, as they used to say in post-war Britain, I'm all right, Jack. Well, he's fine.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Any closing thoughts on the Amazon Synod before we move on? Poison dart?
Yeah.
That was a good reenactment right there.
Yeah. I mean, Curare tipped arrows shot by the Swiss guards at the participants to really give them the feel of the Amazon.
Wow.
Piranhas unleashed in their bathtubs at the Domus Santa Marta. Jaguar. Oh, and let's not forget the flies and the bugs and the ticks and the various things. And they already brought snakes. But dollars to donuts. All those snakes you saw in the worship service, not a one of them was a fer-de-lance or a bushmaster. We let a few of them loose in the crowd. See, yeah.
That's too realistic. See, when you read... Charles, gosh, do you know anything about fantasy, bro?
Okay. I do!
Then you don't go all the way. You see what I'm saying?
I know, and they're not.
For example, like, my fantasy was always to live in the dwarven kingdom under the mountain, but with electricity and indoor plumbing, you see? You can't go all the way. That's ridiculous, you see?
So basically, you'd like to be living in Moria or in the kingdom under the mountain, with Erebor, I guess it was called. You'd like to live there with modern plumbing and appliances and stuff.
Not appliances. I mean, it would kind of be a minimalist sort of theme. Obviously with toilets and stuff like that, but
and electric light.
Yeah. Wait, what?
Yeah.
What did you say?
Electric light.
Yeah, electric light. Yeah.
And heaters. I mean, those places can get cold.
Definitely.
So yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
So this goes back to what I was saying. They're living their dream.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful.
Yes, it is.
But you know what?
What?
It makes you want to live my dream.
What's your dream?
Never hearing from any of them again.
Don't dream it, be it, Charles.
Yes. Only a Rocky Horror quote can save us at this moment. That's right. And you know what? This is my message to the Amazon Synod. Thank you. Your Holiness, Your Excellencies, Your Eminences, Your Reverences, etc. ad nauseam. Don't dream it, be it. You go on down there to the Amazon. You go, girls. You get on down there and, you just shake them shrunken heads. Oh, golly Moses. What a bunch of losers. Anyway. All right.
Okay.
Well, what else we got?
Yeah, where are we on the calendar? What are we looking at here?
Oh, the calendar. I'm glad you asked that question. Because tomorrow is the Feast of Saint Denis, October the 9th. The first Archbishop of Athens, Dionysius the Areopagite, first Archbishop of Paris, His little church, the Martyrium, there is worth seeing as well. And of course, Saint Denis was named after him. Now, I know what you're going to say. Lots of people like to talk about the pseudo Dionysius and separate the bishops of Athens and Paris and claim they were all different people. Well, you know what? I would recommend anyone who feels that way to the work by the martyred Archbishop d'Arbois, who was murdered by the revolutionaries in 1871. He was murdered by the Communards. Read his work on the unity of the various doni. Nobody ever reads the book, but they should, because it's well argued and brings up a lot of points that I've never heard anywhere else that are terribly well attested. So, piece of advice there. But wait a minute, that's not all. No, not by a long shot. Because when you get this, when you watch this, ladies and gentlemen, it will be October the, I know what date this will be. It'll be October the 10th, 11th, 12th. The 12th.
14th.
The 14th?
Yeah, 12th is Saturday.
13th is Friday.
Or is Sunday, and
Saturday,
14th is Monday.
All right, so you'll be seeing this on October the 14th. Well, you will have 2 days left to celebrate an important federal holiday.
What?
Not Indigenous Peoples Day. That's at the Vatican right now.
See, I got it. Indigenous people. Yeah, that's what the city of Los Angeles did.
Yeah, the city of Los Angeles. Now, doubtless bringing back typhus and leprosy, as they've done for the homeless, is part of their celebration by the wise fathers of City Hall. But it is Columbus Day, ladies and gentlemen. Now, you might ask, why is it Columbus Day? Well, there's several reasons why it's Columbus Day. It is the day, of course, upon which he first sighted land at San Salvador in the Bahamas. But there's an interesting story there. His crew had gotten rather restive at their long, seemingly endless journey across the ocean blue. But he promised them that if they had not sighted land by the 16th of October, which was the Feast of Our Lady of the Pillar, they would turn back. And he prayed to Our Lady of the Pillar. Who is Our Lady of the Pillar, you ask? The very first apparition of Mary while she was still alive. Little bilocation there for you guys. Basically, the Apostle St. James the Great, the brother of John, not the James the Less, he was in Spain and had been fruitlessly attempting to convert the Spaniards. He was just about ready to check it in, and go back home, when the Virgin Mary appeared to him on a pillar in the town of Caesar Augusta. And she said to him, stick it out, and one day this will be a great Catholic nation. You'll have converted everybody and be wonderful. Well, he did. And eventually, of course, it happened. And he, as we know, was entombed in the town of Compostela. And you can go see his big tomb there today, Santiago. But Our Lady of the Pillar, Nuestra Señora del Pilar, is a big, big feast in Spain. Pilar is a well-known name among Spanish speakers for girls, and it goes back to Our Lady of the Pillar. So that was the feast day upon which he promised he would turn back if land did not appear. But land did appear on that very day, and that's why it's Columbus Day. Now, Columbus Day has several further things to observe on. One, and you're going to really be upset with me for this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Columbus was Italian. And so it has traditionally been a day to celebrate the many and great contributions the Italians have made to the United States and to the New World as a whole, Canada, Argentina, etc. So it's traditionally celebrated by Italian-American communities with parades and so on. Really great stuff. So that's one reason it's important to celebrate Columbus Day. That's not, I told you you'd be upset with me. That's not all. It is also dare I say it, the day of Hispanidad. It's the day when all the Spanish-speaking peoples from the Philippines and Guam through Latin America to Spain itself celebrate their cultural unity. And again, very, very fitting because Columbus came here under the aegis of the King and Queen of Spain. So that was, well, they didn't come into Austria, but, he went to where you are. So that's a very important thing to do, too, on Columbus Day, is to remember the tremendous contributions to America and the world and the church of the Spanish-speaking peoples. So that's another reason to celebrate it. There's a third reason, and that is because traditionally it was identified with American Catholicism, hence the Knights of Columbus. Given the way they've gone with the uniform and all that, I would not be too terribly surprised if they Circle K the name in the next few years, but let's hope not. Supreme is...
Wait, what?
I say...
If they what the name? Circle K?
Circle K. Drop it. Kick it out. Drop kick it. Throw it away. Toss it out. 86 it. Bye-bye. No more. Gone.
Really? You would not be surprised if they dropped the name Knights of Columbus?
No. If Supreme gets it into its head that it's an unpopular name, you know how Supreme are. The uniform showed us amongst other things.
I can't believe that. No, I don't believe that they would ever do that.
Well, I couldn't have believed they'd have gotten rid of the uniform, and I couldn't have believed if they'd done so, they'd have done it without consulting anyone or giving anybody any time.
Well, that's true, but...
Yeah, that is true.
But
it's a different world, my friend.
But dropping the name is next level. Dropping the name is next tier stuff. I don't think so. I don't know. Well, I mean, we'll see.
Remember, like the Boy Scouts, they're reflecting changes in society. And as we know, the way you reflect changes in society, if you want to keep making money like the Boy Scouts did, is you adjust.
If they drop the name, that's the death of the order. That's it.
I don't know. Maybe they'll change their name to KC's or something. We'll see.
I'll just join the men's club. I mean, that's a Catholic. That's a random Catholic club, right? For men. So okay, yeah, sure.
Holy Name Society. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. Don't get me wrong. It's not something I'm happy to say because I love the Knights.
I don't think they're gonna. I'm not scared of that because
I hope you're right.
Yeah,
I hope you're right. But see, the way people are going crazy over the Knights of Columbus, and the way the leadership have shown themselves in, shall we say, controversial positions,
it's easy to cave. Sure.
Look at all the pro-abort government people, congressmen and state legislators who are in the order. And of course, if the order moves to get rid of any of them, immediately the local hierarchs jump on them. That happened in L.A. with Congressman Roybal. So
if the Knights were trying to remove them?
Yeah, on a few occasions, the local Knights have actually tried to do something. When they've done so, the bishop of the place has jumped on them with all four tentacles.
Okay. See, I think people don't know that there's kind of a growing trend to criticize the Knights where people say, hey, look at this guy. Why aren't the Knights doing anything? So I think that's important information.
The Knights, by their nature, will never go against the hierarchy. Now, since you bring it up, I'll mention specifically, back in the 80s, Cardinal Mahoney was then only Archbishop Mahoney of Los Angeles, and he wanted the red hat. And so he declared that no Catholic could vote for anyone, for any politician who was pro-abortion.
Oh.
Well, there was no election at hand, except another red hat coming up, since his predecessor had just gone past the retirement age, so could no longer vote. So now there's a vacancy here. Back in the days before people like the Bishop of Indianapolis would get the red hat. Well, anyway, so the state council of the Knights of Columbus made the mistake of taking his grace, as he was then, at his word. And so they moved to throw Roybal out of the Knights of Columbus because he had one of the most consistently pro-abortion voting things in Congress. They did so, and then the Archbishop intervened directly, personally, to have him kept in. And the Knights backed down because the Knights are not designed to take on the hierarchy. I mean, it would be like saying, why don't the American Legion criticize military policy? Well, because that's not what they're there for. It's not in their purview. It's not what they were made for. So a lot of that kind of criticism of the Knights is completely unwarranted, because you can't expect more out of them than you can expect out of the hierarchy. Having said that, the whole uniform thing, that didn't come from the hierarchy. That came from Supreme.
Right.
And now the threatening tone of the letters. It's one thing when you're paying people to do things. You don't threaten volunteers. You don't do that. That's nuts. You especially when you're talking about charity and this and that. But you see, this is the way the church in general is today. This is where so much of the hierarchy operates. They talk about love and peace and brotherhood until you don't go along with the program at the speed they want. And then there's Simon Legree on the old plantation. And if you don't lax it, you got to be punished. Well,
yeah, that was actually my same critique of these people on Twitter. It's, the failings of Knights of Columbus are the failings of the rest of the church, the rest of the world.
They sure are. So, you can't expect more out of your council than you're going to get out of your pastor. You've got a good pastor, good council. Just the way it is. And if you've got a bad pastor, do not expect the Knights of Columbus as a council to step up against him, because that's just not their job. What usually happens when you've got a bad pastor anyway is the council falls apart. It's just the nature of the beast. So I love the Knights. I'm very proud to be a member. I'm very sad at what has happened, but it seems to be piece of a piece with everything else. The Boy Scouts and you name it. A part of the general decay of American whatnot. But you can do your part against that decay. Stand up for Columbus Day. Accept no substitutes. It's not Indigenous Peoples Day. It's not Scalp Your Neighbor Day. It's not Heart Carving Day. It's Columbus Day. And yes, I am part Indian. So there. And yes, my name is Coulombe, which is the French version of, you guessed it, Columbus. And you want to know something weirder? Originally, we've traced it all the way back. In the 1500s, before we left France for Canada, it was Italian. It was Colombo. So there. Yeah. I'm expressing my...
Okay, Pocahontas.
Ho, ho, ho. How? I am assuring you of my solidarity with the Italians on this one.
Okay.
And the Hispanics. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's move along. Let's get to the memes.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Memes of production. Are we going to nationalize them?
Yes. All right, our first meme. Whoops. Oh, okay. Well, we'll go with this one. Top floor execs at Tumblr House fire writer Charles Coulombe over alleged communist sympathies.
Nationalize the memes of production.
That's some fake news right there. I mean, because
I'll say, but you watch it go around the internet. Wait till they start excoriating me. Betsy May Oblivion is already writing her column.
That's ridiculous, though. Everyone knows you're not a communist. You're an Austro-fascist.
Yeah, well, okay.
It's ridiculous. It's polar opposites. Right?
Oh, God
am
help
I right
us.
or am I right, Charles?
You're right. Engelbert Dollfuss was right.
Okay.
And he was murdered for your sins, so there.
Okay.
What else we got?
Right.
Let's see the other one.
The other one is, I think this picture perfectly sums up how every Catholic should feel. You have a picture of a person in Crusader garb. I like how everyone just kind of, not paying attention except one guy right above him is looking at him. And I don't know what he's
Well,
thinking. Maybe he's thinking of joining up. I don't know.
joining up or what a weirdo, or both. What a weirdo, I'm joining. Well, I mean, you can imagine he's surrounded by all those stiffs. You know, they all look like the ladies all look like they're auditioning to be Susan from the parish
Yeah,
council.
I was gonna say that you beat me to it. Yeah.
It's dear old Susan. You know, I've told you, she and I could really sing some serious kumbaya together.
I'm sure. I've watched you sing with some of these people, and you enjoy that kind of songs, and it's interesting to watch because they don't know you're making fun of them.
Yeah, I know.
It's really something to behold, to watch Charles sing these cheeseball Nova Sordo songs, and nobody knows he's kind of, I don't know.
Sons of God, hear his holy word. Gather round the table of the Lord. Eat his body, drink his blood, and we'll sing a song of love. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
So, yeah, exactly like that.
Yeah. It brings back my childhood, which was a long time ago. I mean, you remember the Beatles had a song, "Let's All Get Up and Dance," to a song that was a hit before your mother was born?
Mm-hmm.
Though she was born a long, long time ago, your mother should know. Well, that song could have been written for Susan from the parish council,
Yeah.
and her innumerable sisters of all genders across the church.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. What else we got? Before we get started, I just want to thank everyone who has supported the show in any way. You know, not just the patrons, but people who've bought books in the store, sent in book reviews, people who share our videos on social media, clicked like on our videos, submitted questions, made memes, or even just lurked in the shadows and quietly enjoyed our videos without anyone knowing what you're doing. Everybody.
We love our lurkers.
We love our lurkers. I'm just feeling. I was feeling especially grateful today. So thank you, everyone. Keep on doing what you're doing. Thank you so much.
And you know, before we get on to the questions, there's something I do have to say. We have a lot of jokey around here and have a lot of fun, make a lot of smiles. I do think that's terribly important today, and never more than now when everything just gets so bloody crazy. You know, part of the problem is that the very people who are driving us slowly mad are doing it while expecting to be taken seriously. That's the one thing you can definitely deny them. You don't have to treat them seriously. The one thing the devil cannot stand is being laughed at. He doesn't mind being attacked. Well, he doesn't mind being attacked if it's a qualified exorcist who knows what he's doing. But he does not like being made light of. And that's especially true of people. I've told the story before of how I laughed uproariously pointing at Senator Teddy Kennedy. He turned red as a beet. I mean, I could have called him any name in the book, and it wouldn't have had the same effect. But laughing at him. What was he going to do? Call security and say, "Oh, he laughed at me. I'm an important senator, and he laughed." They can't do that. So remember, the one thing you can withhold from them is treating them seriously. Remember that when you're wanting to drive a fist into the wall.
That's true. Yeah.
So
that's interesting food for thought. For some reason, when you said that, I thought of the George Neumayer video, and I thought, what if there was a little different approach to it?
Oh, golly.
Imagine
golly.
that. Imagine that if there was laughter instead. It's like, oh, look at you guys.
It's a good thing I wasn't there. Because, you know, I'm afraid, although I am a journalist of sorts, I probably would have been better for the old Spy magazine than, most. And I would have loved to have gotten a shot of Cardinal Tobin. You know, the first several of them when he's got that granny on her way to wherever she is. He looks like a grandmother, very grandmotherly figure is Cardinal Tobin.
Yeah, you're a big fan.
Oh yeah, you bet. I like grandmothers. I had two of my own.
Yeah.
I love grandmothers. I think they're great. I wish both of mine were still alive.
Yeah.
I think they're wonderful. You know, I was very happy my mother got to be a grandmother. You know, grandmother's great.
Yeah.
And he's a very grandmotherly figure. So I wonder, I might even have told him that.
You talked
You
to
know,
him?
well, I'm saying if I had been
Oh.
in George Newmeyer's position, I might have said, you know, Your Eminence, I find you a very grandmotherly figure. You're very comforting.
You probably would have liked that.
He might have. It would have been fun to see his reaction. I don't know what he would have said. I'd have told Cardinal O'Malley that it's rude to pull old guys' beards, so I won't.
Ha ha ha. Okay.
Well, it is rude to pull. Oh, I'm supposed to tell him it's okay. No way. It's rude to pull old guys' beards.
That's true.
You shouldn't pull Cardinal O'Malley's beard. That's wrong.
That's true.
Yeah. I'm glad we got that straight. Don't you be pulling no Cardinal O'Malley's beard.
Where did this come from? What is this?
Don't pull Cardinal O'Malley's beard. I think it's a fairly simple thing to say. I don't care how tempting it is. You shouldn't pull his beard. He's a Franciscan.
No one was thinking of pulling his beard until you put that thought in our heads.
No, don't be ridiculous. Everyone's thinking it.
Yeah,
it's a
now?
secret urge. Well, that's not my fault.
Yeah, actually it is.
It is a secret urge people have. But I'm here to tell you, yanking on cardinals' beards is a bad idea. I wrote an article on papal beards once, and I want you to know there isn't a pope that I can think of who had a beard, whose beard I would have pulled. Not one. And same goes for cardinals.
Well, thank you. You're so respectful. We're glad.
I think that's something we need these days.
Yeah, some civility.
Yes, exactly. The very idea of pulling a man like Cardinal O'Malley's beard. Heavens. I pull Cardinal Tobin's beard, though.
He doesn't have a beard. What are you talking
I know,
about?
that's why I pull it. If he's wearing a beard, he's obviously in disguise. And what's he doing wearing a fake beard? That's what I want to know.
He isn't wearing a fake beard anywhere.
Well, then don't pull it.
You're very vexing today. All right.
I don't know. Hey, now there's an adjective we might have to use in the future.
Yeah, the vexing Charles Coulombe.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of people who would agree with it for many different reasons.
I'll say.
All right, what do we got in the way of questions? Enough of this falderall, this what's the word? There's another word than falderall.
I don't even know what falderall
Rigmarole. Rigmarole.
Oh, rigmarole.
Enough of this falderall, enough rigmarole.
Okay.
You know what they call the rigmarole in Spanish?
Rigmarole? What?
Rigmarole. This is just in time for Columbus Day, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay.
All right, what do we got?
All right, 2 questions from Brian.
Brian.
October 16th, the feast of Saint Hedvig, is my birthday.
Congratulations.
Can you please tell me more about her, including any books there might be about her? I know she is not one of the most widely venerated saints. Likewise, I am also devoted to Blessed Brian Lacey, as I share his name. Are there any good books about him specifically, or the English martyrs in general?
Okay, well, there were 2 St. Hedvigs. I think both of them were Polish. I don't know which one is observed in October. I'm sorry, I don't know. You'll have to look her up on Google. Blessed Brian Lacey, I have seen in lists. I don't know anything about him either. So here, too, is where you're going to have to use the internet, because the old man doesn't know.
Ah.
But I know that of the 2 St. Hedvigs, one was canonized quite a while ago. The other was canonized by John Paul II.
Okay.
That much I remember.
Brian's second question. I feel myself inclined to accelerationism. with the upcoming Amazon Synod. I find myself, like Francis, not fearing schism. Of course, as one cartoon I saw depicts it, it would be Francis and company going out on a limb and cutting themselves off from the living tree of the church. How much longer can Holy Mother Church contain within her bosom the likes of traditionalists, conservatives, and nominally Catholic liberals?
Well, you'd be surprised how durable the church is and how long she's kept all sorts of wackos in her bosom. As a bishop said to Napoleon when he vowed to smash the church, he said, "We've had 1,800 years and us bishops haven't been able to do it. I doubt you're going to manage it." And that's only half in jest. I don't know what's going to happen. I really have no idea. I can think of all nightmare scenarios as much as anyone else can, but there's no point losing any sleep over it. It will be as it will be. I mean, Saul was struck by lightning and fell off the horse in Damascus. Maybe one day Pope Francis will look at footage of the Synod and start laughing and wonder how he could sponsor something so absurd. Who knows? I don't. That's why we have to pray for him. You know, the Pope is our father, and that sounds great, but stop and think about all the many kinds of fathers there are. What if your father's a drunk? What if he's a wife beater? What if he's an abuser in more than one way? You still owe him a certain filial piety because he's your father, but how do you deal with him? Well, that varies from case to case. And historically, sometimes the church, I'm not saying this is the case now, but sometimes the church has had popes who are downright evil. So, I don't know. I'm looking forward, and this would be the case if I thought it was the greatest thing since plaid paint. I'm looking forward to Pope Francis's successor, because that'll be the end of the prophecies of St. Malachi, according to which Francis will be the last pope, ushering in the end of the world. But maybe St. Malachi wasn't wrong. Maybe all the years that I've thought he was wrong and laughed at the prophecies, maybe I was wrong. Could be. I don't know. I hope not. There's still a lot of world I'd like to see.
Okay.
But who can say? I can't. What I can tell you is that until each of us draws his last breath, we still have the things we have to do ourselves. We still have to receive the sacraments. We still have to perform our devotions, the Rosary, the Sacred Heart, all that. We still have to perform the temporal and spiritual works of mercy. We still have to try to evangelize the milieu that we find ourselves in, be it family, friends, work, or whatever. All the stuff that pertains to us as individuals remain the same no matter who the Pope may be. And if we can't see any sort of connection with whoever's at the top at the moment, if the Pope of the day is John the 12th or Benedict the 9th or Honorius or whatever you like, then it still falls on us to do what we have to do to ensure that our end of the world is good, whether or not the end of the world occurs in our own time. Because if you're ready to meet your own death, ladies and gentlemen, if I'm ready to meet my death, then we will be ready to meet the world's death. That's the thing. And we can never lose sight of that. You see, the devil wants us to. The devil wants us to despair. He wants us to hate. Now, our so-called opponents, he's got special lures for them too. They're not the lures for us. We have special lures that wouldn't bother them at all. They have theirs. We have ours. In both cases, the devil doesn't really care about the lures themselves. For him, they're strictly means to an end. He would be just as happy with a completely orthodox, strict, Jansenist, nasty taskmaster driving decently minded people out of the church. as he would be with this lot driving people like us out of the church. He doesn't care. It's all much of a muchness to him, as long as souls are ruined. That's all he cares about. Any way it takes, he doesn't care. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all. There's an old saying that he gets liberals for sins of chastity and conservatives for sins of charity. Sins against chastity, sins against charity. But there's a certain amount of truth, perhaps, to that. Not that conservatives cannot be unchaste, and that liberals cannot be uncharitable. Quite the contrary. But good, close enough for government work.
Yeah. We published an article recently by Father Ripperger, who, he, based on his experiences in the confessional, he actually says, because of the pride of traditionalists, there's a huge problem with chastity. Because we're discounting it because of how great we think we are.
Well, that's it. I mean, I say all my prayers. I do all my devotions. I have the true Mass and the true faith. So what's wrong with a little bit of fluff on the side?
Yeah.
And that's an easy. You got to remember, the devil is waiting for us in any guise he can, and we have, all of us as children of Adam and Eve, a sort of this weird spiritual death wish, suicidal tendencies. And the proof of the pudding is we've always got something to say in the confessional.
Yeah.
And that's true whether you're liberal or conservative or whatever else you want to call yourself.
Okay. By the way, Brian started this question and said, I feel myself inclined to accelerationism. What does that mean?
I think it means he wants to speed up the end.
Speed up the end? The end of the Synod?
Well, I mean the end of things, cut to the chase. Enough lollygagging around. Let's get to it.
That's pretty scary. I don't know if... Okay.
I don't know. Spare me, please. I mean, it may be he wants to go so far as to what is called immanentizing the eschaton, which is bringing about the end of the world.
Pretty exotic. All right, next two questions are from Jonathan. Mr. Charles, do you think that the Holy League should be restored?
Well, which one? There were several. And you'd have to get countries to be members of them. Today, the only two countries I can think of that would be members of a Holy League would be Liechtenstein and Monaco. And I mean, I'm not saying that's a small thing. They're tiny countries. They have a lot of money between them. The Liechtensteins and the Grimaldis have dough, so that's something. Liechtenstein doesn't have an army, but they've got the Prince's Guard in Monaco, so that's the start.
This is very reminiscent of the question we've got a couple years back, I never forgot, where someone asked, should the Pope call for a crusade? And you asked, who's he going to call?
Yeah. I mean,
I'm
all for it. It's a little bit like the question we had about getting Byzantium back in the pre-show.
Oh, right, yeah.
I said, the only way that can happen is first we've got to get rid of the Catholic Orthodoxism for a start. Then we've got to get all the countries that were once Catholic and or Orthodox to be Catholic and or Orthodox. Then we could talk about getting back Constantinople. We could talk about freeing the Holy Land. We could talk about restoring the great mosque of Damascus as the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. We could talk about all these great things. We could drive the heathen into the desert. You bet. There's all kinds of great stuff we could do. We can come to the aid of our brethren in the Near East, and put the Copts in charge of Egypt. And oh, man, there's just all kinds of good stuff we could do. But before we can get there, there are a couple of teeny weeny little things we got to do first.
I'm so excited to drive the heathen into the desert, though.
But you see, the pen is mightier than the sword.
Yes. Okay, Jonathan's second question. Could Mr. Charles explain the significance of the Battle of Vienna?
Oh, can I ever? Especially because did I mention the nonsense at the Kallenberg last time
No,
in Vienna?
I don't think so. Uh, yeah, I don't remember.
Oh, well. Anyway, this was like something out of Lord of the Rings. In 1683, the Sultan, the Grand Turk, unleashed his forces. They had already seized all of the Balkans and most of Hungary. They crossed the frontier. The emperor left the city to try to gather forces out west in the Tyrol. The city itself was defended by the Prince von Starnberg. The Turkish legions, burning and pillaging as they went, invested the city. There they sat within their walls. It was like the siege of Gondor, or Constantinople, which is what both the Turks were hoping for and the defenders were hoping not. Well, you remember in Lord of the Rings, when the orcs and the rest of Mordor's forces had surrounded Minas Tirith, and then they broke down the barrier. The great door of Gondor was smashed open. The king of the Nazgul was about ready to enter the city. Gondor faced him off, sword in hand, when suddenly a cock crowed, and then they heard the horns. Rohan had come at last. Well, that is what happened at the siege of Vienna. For there they were, and suddenly they heard the horns. Jan Sobieski, king of Poland, riding with his men from out of the north. They broke the siege, and the defenders poured out of the city, and between them they chased the Turks off the battlefield. The Turks left behind an important substance: beans, coffee beans. And a Turkish prisoner taught the Austrians how to make coffee. But not just that. They made rolls in the shape of a crescent. Yes, this is true.
No,
not a joke.
I'm laughing because the way you said you're a Turkish prisoner. What did they torture him? Did they give us all your intel? I said, okay, I'll teach you how to make coffee.
It was just like that. And then he opened up a coffee shop, Honest Abdul's.
Oh, man.
But no, that was the beginning of the coffee shop culture in Vienna and the whole coffee and croissant thing, which to this day should commemorate in your mind the great siege of Vienna. Now, what this did, it was the beginning of the end for the Ottoman Empire. Within 20 years, they've been pushed out of Hungary, out of Transylvania, across the Danube. And from that time on, over the next 100 years, it was just a story of decline, next 200 years. Well, it was a tremendous, tremendous thing. Had Vienna fallen, the Turks would have swarmed into Poland, they would have swarmed into Germany. Who knows where they would have stopped? The Rhine? Who knows? Would they have poured into the Italian peninsula? Maybe. It would have been an incredible disaster for Europe and for the faith. Now, in case I didn't tell the story, last September 7th, a group of so-called identitarians wanted to commemorate the Great Siege at the Kallenberg, which is the hill overlooking Vienna, where King Jan Sobieski and his men surveyed the battle. Well, the Antifa got wind of it, so they cut off all the roads to the Kallenberg. But due to the miracle of social media, the identitarians informed their membership, and instead they had a big torchlight and banner procession through downtown Vienna, commemorating the siege. Meanwhile, the Antifa were left to man the mountain roads in the pouring rain. And they were very upset, so they took out their annoyance on various hikers that passed by and beat them up. The police did nothing to disperse them.
I thought the Austrian police were supposed to be better than United States police. I thought Austria was supposed to be, so much better than the United States.
It is, depending on the government. And the government they had at the time was a caretaker government. We'll see what the new government is like. They just had an election afterwards. So the other thing, though, was that the Austrian newspapers, the Vienna newspapers, 2 of them or 3 of them, had the same stupid line about how the siege is commemorated by far right-wing extremists like the Norwegian mass murderer, what's his name, and the Christchurch shooter. You know, it's almost as if they want people to join the identitarians by being so stupid that nobody can take them seriously. I wouldn't be surprised if whatever man wrote that drivel is their special correspondent of the Amazon Synod. It's just stupid. I mean, the hallmark of the modern world is dum-dum.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. They've made reforms to the journalist crew, I've heard. So it's probably brought him in as part of the reforms.
Yeah, well, you know, reforms. Reforms would be if the Pope stopped giving interviews on long plane rides. But I guess he gets bored easily.
Oh, I forgot to read Jonathan's P.S. He said, P.S. The Habsburg blanket, so soft and cozy, I can feel them. Otto, Francis II, Charles, Franz Joseph, and Maximilian, all watching over me while I sleep. 2 thumbs up. Let me see if I can do this well.
Oh.
There you go. All right.
You know,
shameless plug.
You really should pose with them like Linus.
Oh, that's true.
Claspy in one hand and thumb in the other.
That's true. No, it's a great... can anyone tell me, do they possess a cooler looking blanket than that? Really? I mean, truly. And it's so soft. It's perfect. That's actually... I had to pull that off of my bed because I'm actually using it. So, get that in our Teespring store. Link is in the description, along with a lot of other cool stuff. Okay.
I believe it's called merch.
Merch, yeah. Some swag, some gear. All right. Next question. It recently came to my attention that there have always been many types of contraception. Most of them work pretty well. Why has modern-day contraception led to such social decay when contraception and abortion have always existed?
Well, the reason is very simple. Contraception and abortion used to be despised, and while they've always existed, as you rightly pointed out, they were the province of old wise women, witches. And one of the things that was frequently brought against people accused of witchcraft was that they procured abortions and contraceptions, which were considered murder alike. If you read The Parson's Tale, Chaucer gives a very long argument as to why not just abortion but contraception is murder. I don't know that people would accept it now, but it's an interesting argument. The other thing, too, is that the Hippocratic Oath vowed doctors to procure no abortion. And that's going back to ancient Greek times. So, yeah, we've always had it, but it was universally despised. So, you know, we've always had everything else, too. We've always had every kind of perversion you can imagine. We've always had bestiality. But, you know, in recent times, though, the sheer clinical cleanliness of contraceptives and then abortion made them much more acceptable. So you had regimes that decided to enforce them in their current quasi-sacramental state.
Okay, we have 2 questions from Thomas. 2 questions for the wise sage, Charles Coulombe.
Oy.
What are Charles's thoughts on Russell Kirk and his political views and writings? Can Charles provide any insight to Kirk's conversion to Catholicism?
Well, I only met him after he converted, and I only met him twice, both times at St. Agnes Church in New York. The only insight I can give is that, I mean, I don't know, I have not read, I believe he's written about, but I really have not read a great deal about his conversion. It was certainly a logical step given his views, which, you know, when you say A, that you're a conservative, B, that conservatism is defending Western tradition, okay, B, C, where does that tradition come from ultimately? What is that tradition? Well, it's not the Episcopal Church, and it's not the Daughters of the American Revolution. It's Catholicism, and that is what he ultimately went back to. I mean, he was never a Catholic, but I went back to it in terms of pursuing tradition. As far as his work goes, he was a good American, and that meant that he had to try to legitimize our revolution and make it somehow a conservative thing. And so he championed Burke, who was a Whig. But again, how do I put this? It wasn't as good as it could have been, but it was better than what was on offer. And certainly his work is certainly with a tremendous amount of value. It's just not an end-all and be-all. It was originally Anglo-Protestant and Whig, and reflected the best of those traditions. Obviously, part of the problem with trying to be an American conservative in the sense that he was, is that we really have not had genuine Anglo-American conservatism in this country since the Loyalists left. What we've had are the right and left wings of our national liberalism. But having said that, there are ways and there are ways you can quote-unquote do an ideology. You can be literate, well-read, a good thinker, wise, and make the best of it. Or you can be a boob. He was no boob, not by any stretch. And he also left behind a much neglected and really worth rediscovering body of fiction, which illustrated more clearly a lot of the good principles he held. Kind of like with C.S. Lewis, whose best work really was his fiction, because he didn't feel hampered as he was in his fictional work by his Ulster background.
Did you quote someone when you said the right and left wings of our national liberalism?
I sure did.
Who'd you quote?
I quoted Gary Potter. My old friend Gary Potter.
That's a brilliant turn of phrase right there. That's it right there.
It the right and left wings of our national liberalism.
Yeah.
That's a Gary Potterism. I cannot claim credit for it. I wish I could.
Okay.
Thankfully, Gary is still with us.
Yeah. The one thing, from what I read from Russell Kirk, the thing that I like the most that he pointed out, I've never heard it point out before, but probably someone else did, but one of the differences between conservatism and liberalism is conservatives have a moral order.
Yep.
Liberalism does not actually have a moral order. They abide by something at a point in time, but it is ever shifting. That is so... I love that because I don't think liberals actually realize that about themselves. You know what I mean?
Well, they don't because, you see, they're completely ahistorical.
Yeah.
And history doesn't mean anything. It's only the now. But the now is always changing. That's why we actually live in history.
Yeah.
And today's liberalism is tomorrow's conservatism. I mean, that's why Ronald Reagan was not being funny when he said he was a New Deal Democrat. It's just that everything around him had gone so weird.
A New Deal Democrat, and you like Reagan even though he's a pro-New Deal?
Well, he was the best thing on offer. And there wasn't anything better running. And he was fun. He was good to look at. And by that, I mean he carried himself well. He was presidential. You got to remember, look at the people I grew up under, okay?
How come you didn't link him in with JFK and FDR in terms of, what is it, put on a good dog and pony show?
Well, that's because red-faced, caught out. Yeah, I've been caught out.
Wow.
You put on a great dog and pony show.
Yeah, but you didn't link him in with your personal villains.
That's because his policies and his personality were not as awful as theirs.
But we just established that he's a New Deal Democrat.
Yeah, well, that's what he called himself. But of course, you got to bear in mind that people apply different definitions to the same words.
Yeah.
Because, look, you look at the New Deal. You think of FDR himself. This was a man who had no problem singing "Onward, Christian Soldiers" with Winston Churchill. Could you imagine a president doing that with a British prime minister today?
No.
No, I didn't think so. You can't. So the whole framework has shifted. And the thing with Reagan, he was a better person, I think, than FDR. He wasn't a enormous adulterer like both he and JFK. Number one. Number two, their policies were bad compared to what the opposition were offering. But Reagan's policies were great compared to what his opposition were offering. He called himself a New Deal Democrat, but so did George Putnam. And you'd be hard put to see what they meant by that was that their values and views had not changed and that everything had changed around them. That's what they meant to say. And it was true. But having said that, I mean, if JFK were around today, he would be considered a hard-boiled conservative in the Democratic Party. He'd never get elected. Same with FDR. It wouldn't go anywhere. Today, to be a candidate of the Democratic Party, you've got to be a bearded lady or a pinhead or a pair of Siamese twins. You've got to be fresh from Barnum and Bailey's. No way around it.
Okay.
Also, where I got to give JFK and FDR credit, and I have several times, they certainly were elegant. You saw what I wrote about them and Reagan in Star Spangled Crown.
Well, they funded the arts and writers. Yeah, money in your pocket. I get it.
Not just money in my pocket. Ho, ho, ho. Well, it's true. The one part of the New Deal that was absolutely wonderful was the Federal Writers Project. Because I could have made out like a bandit. Oh. See, that was the thing about the New Deal. Everybody got bought off. It was great. I always think of, what's his name? The filmmaker who made Hairspray and Pink Flamingos. I can't think of his name. He's got a real thin mustache. He's from Baltimore. Funny guy, but sick. Anyway, I can't think of his...
Not Mel Brooks.
No. This guy's an ex-Catholic. Can't think of his name. But he's funny but sick. But at any rate, he has a wonderful line, which is, "I'd have sold out years ago if I could only have found someone willing to buy." So anyway, we all have our price. It's just that mine is too high and my value too low. So what else we got?
Okay, Thomas's second question. What is the best way to read the Bible? Should I read it cover to cover? How should I break up the Psalms and the Proverbs? Because I feel like they're better read over a period of time in parts.
Well, I would read the Bible cover to cover. That's the way I've done it. I wouldn't read it quickly, and you're right. Don't go through the Psalms and Proverbs quickly. But I would definitely read it from Genesis, book by book by book, till the Apocalypse. because you will get a definite feeling for how the one builds on the other.
Yeah.
It's Scripture is a wonderful thing, frankly.
Yeah. When I was going through chronologically in the Bible, I remember it went from John to the Acts of the Apostles, and
Yeah.
and I was like, who are these people? Who Peter, where were you before with this speech and all this and with all these, you know what I mean? After Pentecost, they were completely, and it hits you when you read it, you know, in order on the same day, and it was really incredible.
Yeah. And the similarities, the differences between each of the writers comes out as well.
Yeah.
So read them, Genesis through to the Apocalypse, but take your time through Proverbs and Psalms.
Yeah. What's your favorite Old Testament book?
Genesis.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because it's historical. It tells us from the creation of the world, the fall, all the way through the beginning of Moses' adventures. And it's because it's prior to the Mosaic covenant in a sense. It's more generalized, for all the people of the world, as you might say.
Well, I like the Book of Wisdom a lot. That's one of my top books, and that is pretty generalized.
No, it is, and I like wisdom, or as we say today, the wisdom literature. But I love the historical chronicles,
Okay.
And I mean the stories of Abraham and Isaac and Noah and the whole thing. I get a kick out of it.
Okay. We have 3 questions from Max. First question is, what is Charles's opinion on Hunter S. Thompson as a character on one hand and his texts on the other?
Well, he certainly summed up my career.
How?
When the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. That's pretty much what has happened. That's why I'm here. That's why you're here. As Criswell says in Plan 9 from Outer Space. That's why I'm here. That's why we're all here. Well, okay. But as a person, I mean, he a very keen observer of the human scene, of the frailties and foibles and so forth. And he destroyed himself. And I don't just mean that by the suicide. I don't just mean that by the drugs and booze. He's a fun read, lighthearted until he offed himself. But ultimately, he faced the dilemma that every keen observer of the human scene who doesn't have the faith is faced with. Without the faith, it becomes an exercise in meaningless futility, a horrible pain that is best ended quickly. With the faith, it becomes something entirely different, and dare I say, almost enchanted. So.
Okay, next question from Max. What does Charles think about the writings and especially poetry of Charles Bukowski and him as a person?
Oof. Well, I have to be honest with you. I've never read any of Bukowski's poetry. I was around when he was around, and it turned out that a number of the same bars we both enjoyed. But I don't believe I ever met him. I don't know what I would have thought of him.
What is he known for being?
A drunk who wrote down and out kind of poetry.
Like Jack Kerouac or something? Was he a beat?
What's that?
Like Jack Kerouac or something? Was he a beat or what?
Yeah, only more so. He wasn't a beat. I mean, he was just they called him the poet laureate of LA's Down and Out.
Okay.
And the LA Weekly lionized him, and he'd be at places like Beyond Baroque and so on. And I certainly don't begrudge him his success in his final years. I mean, heavens, Anybody who's been slogging away in this business, and I don't care what you've been doing unless it was porn, if you finally end up making a living out of it, God be praised. Bless you, my son. And Bukowski, toward the end of his life, he was lionized, which, is great. I don't know what he was like as a person. As I say, he was someone you always heard about. Eventually you heard about him doing readings and things like that, but I never met the man. The only thing I can tell you is that he and I favored some of the same bars, but he would go in and spend lots of time in them. I was never a great one for that. In fact, I can think of maybe 3 times that I've gone into a bar by myself to spend any quality time. I've always just taken people into them, for a pleasant night out. I've never been a great one for going into a bar just to go into a bar. I don't know, maybe a few times more than 3, but it's just, if I've got a choice between going home and going into a bar and not, just to go into a bar, I'll go home. I love meeting people in bars. That's fun. I love going on pub crawls with people, with friends. That's great. Nothing I like better than hitting 3 or 4 or 5 bars in a night with a friend or 2 or 3 or 4, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But the idea of just going into a bar and sitting there all day drinking never appealed to me.
What's Max's last question? What's Charles's view on the UFO phenomenon? Does he accept the opinion that they might be demonic? I remember him once stating that the occult phenomena could have been ghosts in particular, function according to the rules we do not know. Perhaps this could also apply to the UFOs, as they seem to act in weird and unexplainable ways.
Well, I think it's possible that some of them are demonic. I mean, if they exist, of course. I tend to think that the bulk of them, if they exist, are really more likely to be what our fathers called fairies, elves, the other folk. If they exist, they were shapeshifters and all that because their being was such that they could adjust their appearance. I would not be surprised if, just as they showed our ancestors what they wanted to see or expected to see, castles on the hill and dancing in the moonlight, today you get UFOs. Before the medieval folk, maybe that's where you saw your centaurs and fawns and all that, the way we see in the writings of St. Jerome. That's if any of these things exist. I certainly don't know. One of the things that impel me toward this thing is the time distortion. UFO abductees, again, if these things really happen, which I don't know, claim to undergo all sorts of time distortion. The time spent with their captors bears little relationship to the time outside of the experience. So that sounds very much like what would happen with the people captured by the fairies. But who knows? I don't.
Okay, our last question today is from Theo.
All right.
Professor Plinio Correa de Oliveira talked about the church's preferential option for the nobility and the mission of nobility and elites in society. He draws on the allocutions of Pius XII in describing their duties of leadership and as exemplars of domestic piety and virtue in a well-functioning society. Could you give us your thoughts on the place of nobility and elites in a Christian and post-Christian society?
Well, I mean, obviously, I agree with the professor. I agree with Pius XII. The nobility, and again, what do we mean by this? The hereditary nobility with titles, landed gentry without titles, civic patriciate without titles, all of these sorts of people. If you have a position in life that allows you time and leisure to develop your personal abilities and so forth, then you have an obligation to use them for the good of your fellow man. Now, typically, people of the sort that the professor and Pius XII were describing have centuries of traditions of various kinds behind them of service, and they do have an obligation to try to maintain those traditions. Now, unfortunately, you often find, and this has been an ongoing trend for the past century or more, century and a half, that amongst such people, you often, because they have money and they have time and so forth, they often lead immoral lives and get divorced several times and all that, which is unfortunate because they are the ones who should be showing society an example. Today, it's even worse because they, in addition to not to a lot of them, because there are some who do try to pursue the best traditions of their background, not only do you see them behaving badly, but imitating the worst of the lesser classes, whose virtues they don't have.
Okay. This leads me to an important question. Given how media operates and how media, like scandal sheets and stuff like that, and reality TV, there is sort of an attraction to the ill-behaved rather than the well-behaved.
Correct.
So how can you actually have good models when that's boring? You see?
Well, the way you do it is that you exert yourself in various areas, in whatever areas you can, in whatever you find open to you. It could be in charity work or conservation, preservation, religious work. Maybe even trying to acquire media outlets yourself and running them properly.
I mean,
Now,
that's kind of done,
you,
but everybody kind of throws away. It's like, the NBA with their bad reputation. So then, they always advertise NBA cares, and it's always,
it's always rot.
right. I'd be more impressed if they did all this work but ditched the camera,
Well, see, that's the thing. And you'll find over here, I notice, a lot of nobility doing all sorts of extraordinary things, but they don't get any patting on the head for it.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing that occurred to me, actually, I was thinking about not precisely this, but something similar. The media focus on the weird and the bizarre and the stupid.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know, drag queen story time and that kind of thing. Now, in journalism, there has always been the tendency to go for the strange, the bizarre, because as the old saying has it, dog bites man. That's not news. Man bites dog. That's news. Now, that is an old, old thing. And one understands it because that's how you sell paper, watch your video, do whatever you're doing. But the difference is that in those days, they didn't pretend that it was not only normal, but better. You see, today, outraged dog finally overcomes 5 years of oppression and bites his worthless scumbag master. See, that's the way it's presented. In other words, the weird and the bizarre and the strange, which always, you always focus on that because that gets people's attention, is presented as the right, the true, and the good. And the normal is somehow wrong. So there's a difference between the new, I hesitate to call it journalism, the new media excretion and the old. A big difference. And don't get me started on the line between journalism, between news reportage and editorializing. There is none.
I realized something recently about myself because we were talking about, we had a question the other day about how do you receive your news, right? And we outlined it, you outlined what you go to. And I realized something about me that because I kind of tune out mostly, but I readily accept news reported through my friends.
Yeah.
Like in face to face. And it's because I trust my friends. It's like, even though that they're getting it from the same media source, the fact that it goes through my friends somehow makes it good for me because it's like they're my friends. I trust them.
It gives it a legitimacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought that was fascinating that's the state of media right now. Like, I have to rely on friends because there's literally, I don't like going to anything else, really.
No, and of course, really, the friends might not know any better than anybody. I mean, it's all. It's a crazy bloody world, I'll tell you. Crazy, crazy, crazy. Although those of us who are living in an Amazon of the heart, we understand.
The Amazon of the heart.
The real Amazon.
Explain that to me. The real Amazon.
Well, I mean, when you think of the Amazon, all right, what do you think of? You think of a disease-ridden jungle hell. This filled with parasites of every kind and piranhas and just diseases. And, oh my gosh, horrific stuff. Well, imagine that you had that in your heart.
The Amazon of the heart. Yeah.
That's what the Synod is about. It's the Amazon of the heart. It's not about spreading typhoid fever and the plague in the external world. It's about concentrating that kind of stuff in who you are, so that every participant can become a sort of interiorly a sort of steaming jungle hell of his own. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying. Kind of like Heart of Darkness.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. We all become our own Colonel, or not Colonel, but
Mr. Kurtz.
Mr. Kurtz.
Yeah. We all become our own Mr. Kurtz. And I think it's a beautiful thing. I think Hunter S. Thompson would have appreciated it. I think Criswell, perhaps. Ed Wood, definitely. Ed Wood would have really been able to film the Amazon Synod in a way that would do it justice.
That's actually true.
It is.
Oh, man, I wish he was alive just for that. Oh, man, that would be great.
Richard O'Brien could set it to music. He did a great job with Rocky Horror. I'm sure he'd do a smashing job with the Amazon Synod. And, he could even, to save money, after he does the conclusion of the Synod, when, they have the snake charmers and the voodoo dolls and the shrunken heads and everything, at the very end of it, he could just splice in the original footage from Rocky Horror with the criminologist at the end, looking at the Amazon Synod fathers, and then it turns into a spinning globe. And he says, and crawling on the planet's face, some insects called the human race, lost in time and lost in space and meaning. Now, if that doesn't sum up the Amazon Synod, I don't know what does.
Okay, well, closing thoughts on Amazon Synod. Everybody try to hang in there. We're right there with you, trying to just stay tough.
Again, to quote Richard O'Brien from Rocky Horror, stay sane inside insanity.
Absolutely.
Columbia couldn't do it, but you can. You've got it in you. Why? Because you're smart enough, you're good enough, and doggone it, people like you.
Now that is from Saturday Night Live. Who is that? That's not the church lady.
No, well, the guy who played the church lady.
Yeah.
Daily Affirmation with Richard Smalley.
There we go. There we go. That was he's a senator now.
No, that was Al Franken.
Al Franken. Oh, Al Franken wasn't that guy? Okay.
No, so Al Franken was on Saturday Night Live earlier.
Yeah.
He actually only had one funny deal.
Yeah.
He was not terribly funny, but he had one funny thing. One funny thing was, as the 80s were approaching in 1979, his shtick was, and now, ladies and gentlemen, Al Franken says, ladies and gentlemen, the 80s are going to be the Al Franken decade. People are going to say, what's Al Franken thinking? What's Al Franken wearing? What is Al Franken's view of that? That was his only funny thing, and it stayed in my mind the entire 80s.
There you go.
And then when 89 came along, I said at that particular New Year's Eve party, well, it's the end of the Al Franken decade. We're past him. He's over now. But just like Mr. Obama's vice president, Joe Biden, you can't keep a good man dead.
Wait, what? What is that in reference to? What, did he say something stupid regarding that?
No, he's just still existing. I mean, before, when Obama made him vice president, nobody had thought of him seriously in 10 years. And Obama raised him from the dead. That's why I was convinced Obama was the Messiah, because of that particular miracle.
Makes sense. It all makes sense.
I ran to touch the hem of his garment, but he'd already moved on.
Wow.
We have books anyway.
We have books. Let's move on. Book of the week.
Yes.
Because it's October, An Exorcist Tells His Story by Father Amorth. And we have more Father Amorth books. An Exorcist, more stories by Father Amorth. And yet another book, An Exorcist Explains the Demonic by Father Amorth. I like these books, especially for October. There are a lot of important takeaways from these books. First off, I feel they're especially important in an age that simply does not recognize evil. That you're dealing with priests who, check in day out, and they're face to face with evil. They actually treat evil like it's real, right?
Which means trying not to be part of it themselves.
Right. So one of the biggest takeaways that Father Amorth talks about is the power of confession, which was so surprising. That was probably one of the most surprising things about the book, where he says that the rite of exorcism is so exalted when really confession is exponentially more powerful.
Oh.
And that struck me so hard. I go to confession so much more ever since I discovered that from that just really, I don't know, it invigorates you to know that. And even though I think now they say Father Amorth went to the Novus Ordo, is that correct?
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, okay. But it's interesting because his stuff is in lockstep with Father Ripperger's. And it makes sense, right? Because it's like, wow, this doctor who treats the flu, he discovered all the same things work against the flu as this other doctor who also treats the flu.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
And one of the interesting things was that under JP2, they came up with a new rite of exorcism.
Yeah.
And Amorth didn't like it.
Yeah, I heard Father Ripperger's take on it too. He said the old rite is more effective, except in there was a special case where the new rite was somehow more effective. A very small thing. I forgot why. I forgot what he explained, but I thought that was interesting.
Probably people who were possessed by dead liberal priests.
Maybe, but so it's interesting because one of the things that I feel that both of them, the most important thing to their approach is that, obviously with exorcism you're dealing with possession, right? But they treat all diabolic influence as diabolical influence, which means temptation is another way that the devil is trying to get control of you, like possession. Yeah. It's far more frequent, and they both, they both are going to change your perspective on the spiritual warfare. The temptation is a battle, and the more you succumb to temptation and you give in to sin, the more the devil gets control of you, or your personal demon gets control of you. It might not be possession per se, But the more you give into sin, the more you actually become like the demon that is assigned to you. How do you like that? You lose your identity, and you become like the identity of the demon that is assigned to you.
That's pretty awful.
Yeah.
It's not happy making.
Yeah. So so this gets your mind in special places about liberating yourself from sin, because that's what it is. It's liberation. And so yeah, in the words of Mother Angelica, get to confession, you bunch of sinners.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
And since we're talking about Exorcist, and I'm sure we have new audience people, I always like your story about when you've talked to the Sri Lankan exorcist.
Yeah.
Can you tell that for everyone?
Well, sure. He's dead now, Father Flavian Villagamutta. He's a Croatian, and he was the Archdiocesan exorcist in the Archdiocese of LA. Well, he had a very pleasant way of speaking, very amusing man. And I remember he was saying to me, in my country of Sri Lanka, we have many possessions. Devil worship everywhere. It's terrible. In this country, nothing like. I performed only 8 exorcisms last year. And I'm looking at him. Only 8. He says, you have to go on what is called the Black Fast. 40 days without anything but bread and water. Because if you come in to see the devil and you have eaten, he will say, what are you, some holy man with your belly all filled with food? The importance of the fast cannot be underestimated. And so I said, well, gee, can you describe anything you've seen? He says, well, yes. The last one I did, this was on a particular occasion, was in Long Beach, California. I went into the apartment, and the little girl was under the table spinning around like a top. And, I'm telling it, and it's funny. When he said it, there wasn't the slightest bit of humor. It was just deadpan, matter of fact. And, he said to me, of course, if any of the witnesses, and you always have to have witnesses, if any of the witnesses have unconfessed mortal sins on their souls, the demon will happily call them out and explain exactly what they were. This could be most embarrassing. I'm sure it was. And of course, it was observation of exorcisms that completely changed Malachi Martin.
Ah, yeah.
He wrote his book, Hostage to the Devil. Initially, he sold it, I should say, with the idea that he was going to debunk exorcisms and possession. Well, that's not what happened. As he said, when he started the book, he was a garden variety liberal Jesuit. And when he ended the book, he'd had his eyes opened. He had not been a wonderful person before that time, I can tell you. But it had a huge effect on him.
So it's interesting from your story. Again, it shows the power of confession, that confession is doing something that's very real, that it's blocking the demon from seeing what's going on. He's losing his grip on you by going to when you go to confession.
It's true. The more you go, the less power he has. And the same is true for communions you make having confessed. It also reminds me of something else, though this doesn't have to do with the book, but we are in October approaching Halloween. This is a good time to begin what I hope we'll all be doing through November, the month of the Holy Souls, which is having masses said for our deceased loved ones. They've escaped the demon's snares. And while they can't help themselves, they can help us. And any prayers you say for them, any masses you have offered for them, they will return the favor from their side. They're very grateful for whatever help you can give them. So I would definitely do those prayers. Don't wait for November. As we get closer and closer to Halloween, the veil between the worlds grows thinner. Oh, and another thing, speaking of that, a lot of people tell me that this time of year, they tend to dream about their deceased loved ones.
Well, that's what you said last episode, that you do.
It has for me. So here's my advice. You dream of Aunt Daisy or Uncle Ted?
Uncle Ted?
Well, I don't know.
I don't dream of no Uncle Ted. Are you kidding me?
Uncle Bob. All right, Uncle Giovanni or Aunt Matrinka in your case. But whoever they are, you dream of them, have a mass said for them. It's the biggest thing you could do for the holy souls in purgatory. And it's probably a safe bet that if you dream of them, they can use it. And if, which God forbid, if it won't do them any good, I don't mean that they've gone to heaven, although then too, if they've gone to heaven or they're beyond help, then the merits of that mass you have said for them will go to somebody who needs it.
Right. I forgot what saint or what mystic said that, but no prayer goes to waste, even if it doesn't go to the person you prayed for.
No, it'll go to somebody. I mean, one thing this time of year should remind us of also is how closely bound we really are all to each other by prayer. Both those of us on earth and those in heaven and those in purgatory. Communion of saints is very, very real, ladies and gentlemen. And it makes perfect sense that all saints and all souls are tied up together.
Okay, that'll do it for this episode. Don't forget to buy the books.
And the blanket. Yep.
And we always need more patrons. Get more exclusive content, all that good stuff. So that'll do it.
And so, if it's off the menu...
If it's Monday, it's off the menu. And the soul you
save may be your own.
There we go. That'll do it, Charles. All right, God bless.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, God bless. Take care. Happy Columbus Day. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.